Good evening and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. Each week I have this opportunity for you and I to sit and we'll hear a story. And this time we're having a couple join us for the evening, David and Neesha Oliver. And they came from a long line of former Nazarene, Episcopal, Anglican before they found their way into the Catholic Church. So welcome to both of you to The Journey Home. It's good to have you here. To hear your story. Let me shut up real quick because I got two of you to talk for this time. So please get us started in your journey.
I'll start out. I grew up, I was baptized in the Congregational Church, and I remember being there for a while, and there was a small stint in the Methodist Church, and it wasn't until like my teenage years that we ended up in the Nazarene Church. And we went there because they had a great youth group and all of that, and so I played drums during Sunday worship, and then I found out there was a youth group through the Assemblies of God that had like a youth worship team, so I played drums for them as well, and so I had a little bit of a mixture of Assemblies of God and Nazarene and all of that during then, and I stayed in Nazarene Church until college. When I went to college for becoming a youth pastor, I changed my major several times, but I had originally went for becoming a youth pastor.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, and that's where we met, and our story went on from there, but.
Well, just again, to go back a little bit, and so congregational, Methodist a little bit, Nazarene, and of course your drums played a little bit in that. If you look back on that time, did you catch the faith during that period?
Oh yeah, most definitely. My parents were always, we always prayed before we went to bed and meal times and all of that. And I officially accepted Christ into my heart at 7 or 8 years old. And I just always felt connected to him. And so when I accepted him at 7 or 8, it just felt like a, official thing, but it wasn't like I didn't have him before then, so I always felt like he was near and everything.
Right, so Christ was an important part of your faith. So you had Congregational, Methodist, Nazarene, Assembly of God, no Catholic connections in there?
Not yet, no. My dad had grown up Catholic, or he was in the Catholic Church when he was younger, but I had no Catholic connections when I was growing up. So.
And no lurings in that direction at all during any of that time?
No.
Okay, all right. And then you met this guy.
Yes, my story is a little bit more complex.
Okay. So
I grew up Catholic, but by the time I hit First Communion, I realized I wasn't really enjoying my time there. I was kind of bored, and as a kid, and so I just kind of put up a stink, and I won, and I didn't have to go. So I stopped attending after that, and went through a turbulent time in my life as a teenager. Had a medical condition, had actually a thyroid condition that was misdiagnosed by some doctors as a psychological condition. So with that, I got put on medications, and over the course of about 4 years, got put on about 15 different medications, which led me down some just turbulent path in my life. Very depressed, very suicidal, severely obese. I was over 350 50 pounds at that time, and at age 13, So it was a very difficult time in my life, and I do remember walking downtown with my mother one particular day, because I kind of dropped out of middle school, didn't really go. And then when I went into high school, I went for maybe 2 months and then dropped out officially. So during that time, I was going to probation and court and all those things because, as a child, you're supposed to go to school. So, it's a good thing if every parent wants their child to do that. But I remember one particular day walking downtown with my mother and just kind of thinking about the meaning of life and thinking about, what is our faith? Do we believe in God? And having that conversation, and she kind of reassured me that, there is a God, and she didn't have anything great and elaborate to state about it, but it was just this idea that, yes, there is a God, and I wanted to kind of pursue that a little bit more. So that kind of went a little bit dormant in my life, but it was always there.
So the seed was there,
right?
But it still troubles me to be thinking that seed is there, but what is covered up is the overpowering interconnective effect of so many multiple medications,
right?
That one medication is one thing, 3 is another, 5 is another, 10 is another, and you get to the point where it's hard to know how one's affecting with the other and how it's affecting you.
Right. And every medication I would go on, they would give me another one to, one would maybe make me anxious, so then the other one would be something to make me less anxious, and then that would
cause you not to sleep, so then you had to get one that.
Lord.
And I think even some of the worst things, that happened was, my mother actually had to, give me tranquilizers at some points, like tranquilizer pills that would kind of knock me out if I just got really bad, because I would kind of go into these bits of just, anger and frustration, and it was really sad, so it was a hard time in my life. So throughout that, I was always home and didn't really do anything, so I didn't go to school. And but my brother had met a woman through a dating website, and she wanted to meet at a local Nazarene church. I think it was kind of like a safe place to meet, and he didn't want to go by himself, so he was like, hey, well, come with me. So I decided, I'll go with you, check it out. And when we went, I must have been about 15 or 16 at the time. Heard the gospel preached, and for the first time in my life, kind of just heard things I had never really heard before. And my eyes were opened, and I just kind of wanted to know more about what that was. So literally within, a week or two from that, we were, seeking membership at that church, and we were both baptized again within the Nazarene church, and got heavily involved there. So throughout that time, I started getting involved in the youth group. So that was really good for me growing up, because I didn't have any school connections or friends my age. People at school just kind of knew that I had all these problems and kind of went away, So it was nice to be meeting people and pushing myself out of my shell. And eventually the Nazarene church I was a part of, they ended up having a church plant that they needed help with. So my brother and I went over to that church plant to help out, and kind of took on the youth and young adult group that they had there. For a couple of years until went to college, and we both met at a Nazarene college nearby.
Now, how did you get to go to college if you really,
Skipped over that bit.
you still all the medication issues as
Right.
well as you aren't going to school.
Right. Yeah. So in between there, by the time I was around 16, my mother kept pushing and pushing and pushing for me to get revisit the doctors and see if they could see reevaluation of things. So eventually we got checked out again, and they found out that it was a thyroid condition, and that I really didn't have these psychological issues that were going on. So slowly, it took a year to come off all the meds, just because you have to kind of come off slowly. If you come off all of them at once, it could have horrible effects on you. So I did come off all those medications over the course of a year. I had still dropped out of school by that time, so I went to work full-time when I felt like I could. I worked full-time at a gas station nearby, did my daily work, and did that till I was 18. But up through that point, when I had joined this youth group, I had met some connections who, kind of instilled in me this desire to help and to be part of this youth group. So I wanted to kind of be a pastor as well at this point in my life. I felt this calling, something in my life that I wanted to do. So, to do that, I would have to go to college. So, and where else to go besides the local Nazarene college where I would go. So they helped me by helping me study for my SATs, and I took my GED and passed all of that, and applied to college, got in, and started in 2003.
Yeah. And what I'm imagining, knowing a little bit about the theology that you were in, you were recognizing God's grace in your life and what He was doing and leading you and opening your heart and giving you a call and all of that.
Right. Yeah, in the Nazarene church, you have this whole theology of the entire sanctification, and which was really instilled in me too, because I always just wanted to. I had this pursuit of perfection, which obviously I will never, possibly reach in this life, but. It was always instilled in me, and that kind of, I connected with that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, God had freed you up for the influence of all those drugs,
right.
So that you could hear that seed that had been planted.
Right.
So it's at that college then where you two meet, right?
Right.
Yeah, we met it was your first day there, and I was a year ahead of him, and we became friends, and we were friends for, I think it was like a year and a half, and then we started dating, and shortly after that we were engaged, and we got married in my senior year and your junior year. And So it was tough being married and, still being in college at the same time, but, we wouldn't have had it any other way. We knew that we were meant to be together, and it was just a blessing to...
Were you both on the pastoral track?
At the time, I think the time that we met, I might have still been under youth ministry, but by the time we got married, I was in working on writing track and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay.
And I think you were still pursuing the pastoral track and everything.
Yeah. So from that time, after we had met and kind of got dating and got engaged, the whole time I'm going through my ministry experience, she had changed majors, as she noted. So she had kind of gone over to this English major and started pursuing that writing track. I still continued to pursue the whole pastoral track. So I was doing internships everywhere and going in the Nazarene Church, there's a thing called your local licensure, which really just kind of gives you the authority to preach within the Nazarene Church. And it gives you the sponsorship of a pastor to push you along for your district licensure. So within the Nazarene Church, you have to have your local license for a year, and then you can go for your district license if everything goes well and you get approved. So with that, I had gone through at the local church that I was part of before going to college. I had been locally licensed there, and then started running into. We had what I call like 3 major breaks with the Nazarene Church during that time in our lives, and that first one was at the local church that I was part of. Wanted to get some different experience since I'd been in that church for a few years, and everybody had kind of known me as I came up to speed and wanted to be a pastor. Wanted a different experience.
And it was the summer that we were engaged, so we needed to plan for our wedding and everything. So the Nazarene Church out in Western Mass, where I had lived, said that they would help him with an internship. So we thought, that's a great opportunity that he can do that there while we finish planning the wedding and everything. So you went to go tell your pastor about it.
Right. And that was all kind of met with a lot of resistance, which was kind of surprising to me because I hadn't really seen that side of things. This emotional kind of connection there where, when I tried to pull away to go do something different, there was this, resistance to do that.
They were interpreting that as your rejection of them or that church?
Yeah, I'm not really 100% sure.
How.
But I know like when we actually, in the end, the pastor ended up conceding and saying, okay, you can go, as long as you write letters back to us and let us know how things are going. But then the pastor proceeded to pray that our ministry would be unsuccessful so that we would come back, and that if we didn't come back, that the shepherd's hook was going to come back and get us. So it was kind of this underbelly of things. We were just like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Just a reminder, our guests are David and Neesha Oliver, and so talking about their Nazarene experience. So they don't want to let you go in this church.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we end up going anyway because that was just the plan that we were going to follow. And went to Western Mass, tried my second internship out there, and things just didn't go well from the very get-go. I tried to get involved. There was a lot of miscommunication, and the pastor there ended up getting very frustrated with me. He was trying to set up meetings, but I hadn't got his calls, and there was a lot of things like that. And in the end, the result was just that, he really was looking for somebody to come in and just work at the church, and I was really looking for somebody to help me, mentor me, to give me a little bit different experience. So we decided not even to fulfill that internship and kind of stepped away from that. And during that time was kind of one of those first major points for me in my faith journey of just kind of wondering, what am I doing? Am I Nazarene? Am I even Christian? It's like I'm just feeling all this animosity towards the church.
Like hitting all these roadblocks that you're like, this is what I want to do, and I'm being prevented from it all the time.
Something that I truly felt God was calling me to, and I'm working towards that, and then hitting all these roadblocks and not understanding them. So that summer we had spent time away from the Nazarene Church a little bit, and just a couple of local churches just visited and didn't really get involved.
This summer you're married and done with college?
This is what we were engaged during that summer.
Okay, gotcha.
And I'm very thankful for Neesha being in my life at that time, because she was really there to kind of help me and say, you know what, it's not that you're upset with God, it's not that your faith is shaken, it's that your faith in humanity is shaken a bit, and help me kind of parse that out a little bit and gave me a little bit of hope to keep moving forward with it all. So we ended up coming back to college for my junior year, and I got involved with a different local parish and started my internship there, and everything seemed to be going well for a little bit. And then it turned again into like this more of the same type of thing. There was still something missing for me.
There wasn't that mentorship that you needed.
Yeah.
It was more of like, oh, here, you can do the sound or you can do the projector. And I think you got one chance to preach, and that was it. And,
So it was a very disheartening time, but I knew at that point I needed to kind of be in one place to get my district licensure. So I was locally licensed there, did my year, and then started working towards my district licensure. So I had the pastor's full support at that point and was moving forward in that direction. And within the Nazarene Church, when you're going for your district licensure, there's this whole process for I don't know if it's not, I think it's about a year, where you're going through like psychological evaluations, retreats, you're going to courses, and they're trying to like teach you about their basic tenets of faith, and
interview us both, and
interviews,
everything.
and everything was going very well, actually. The district had really shown a lot of high hopes for us, and
positive feedback on everything, which was great. We were like, oh, things are starting to take off.
Right.
This is awesome.
And about a week before I was supposed to go in for my district licensure and get the interview and all that, the final interview, my pastor had given me a call, and I kind of knew immediately that it probably wasn't a good call, because I hadn't really had too much connection with him over the time. And sure enough, he wanted to get together for breakfast. And when we got together for breakfast, about 3 days prior, he decided he was going to pull his sponsorship from me. And kind of, he wasn't very satisfied with my ability to be there at the parish enough for things like that.
Though he had never mentioned anything like that to us throughout the time that we were there. So it was a complete surprise.
So to add to the disheartening that I had already had from the previous experiences, it was just kind of another, punch to the gut that I had had. And during that time, I was just trying to find out, what am I supposed to do here? And unfortunately, it came at a horrible time, because my mentors at the college, who were also sponsoring me, were all away overseas for a conference. So I had to try to make a decision about what I was going to do. And kind of being young and being a little bit immature, probably, I felt like I could probably go to the district and, state my case. So I did that. Did not go too swimmingly for me. And the district superintendent was kind of irritated that I had gone right past everybody and gone to her to kind of raise up these issues. And funny thing that ended up coming out of all of this was she had gone back and talked with all my previous internship experiences, the ones that hadn't even gone very, very well. And all of them gave really bad reviews of my ability, which I thought was really striking and shocking at that point, because I had really personal connections with some of these people.
Right, especially that first one, when your first local license.
Right. And even looking back, like, just a few days ago, I was looking through a folder I had of certificates, and I was getting all these appreciation certificates for all the hard work I was doing and things, and just to think back and think of how, all that kind of just was gone all of a sudden, because maybe I had not done what they had wanted, or gone in a direction that they wanted. So the district superintendent had kind of been very clear that, I was not kind of meeting the standard. That the standard was that, she had been trivocational, she had done all these things. So because at that time I had some excuses for why I wasn't really being able to participate in the way that I wanted to. I was recently married. I had a full-time course workload at school. I was working 30 hours a week, and then to try to get down to north of Boston at like 6 p.m. for a Bible study was really almost impossible.
With the traffic.
I'd be there by 8 o'clock
afterwards.
So I thought they were pretty legitimate concerns, but in the end, it was very disheartening, and I just left that really kind of destroyed. Felt like this big.
Yeah. We were pretty shaken by it, and you still wanted to pursue ministry and a pastorate job, but now we felt like our opportunity was gone, and so we were like, well, now what are we going to do? And we knew you should probably go to seminary and do that. So we were like, well, maybe if we go out to Rochester, New York, we can, it's a different district, we can start seminary there. And so we made our way out there and got into a lease in our apartment, and I was able to find a job at the seminary, which was great. But people weren't hiring him because he was overqualified for bagging groceries at a grocery store, but not qualified enough for like a corporate job because he hadn't had much work experience, outside of working at the school. So it was kind of like, okay, well, what are we going to do then? If you can't find a job and our savings is running low, and we what is our choices, you know? And so we decided that you weren't going to start seminary and that we were just going to make our way back to Boston and try to find jobs here because we knew it was a thriving place. I guess when we moved out to Rochester, it was right after like a recession and stuff, so there was just not a lot of jobs as well. And so we moved back to Boston, and like I said, we had no money to our name because we had to break our lease, so the rest of our money had to go for that. And so we moved in with his parents in their 1-bedroom apartment and slept on their floor for the summer.
That's always tough.
And so this is all like within our first year or two of marriage, you know, that we're like, you know, have all these dreams for your, you know, for your future, and you're like seeing everything crumble, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah, and I mean, how hard it is. You're asking, Lord, what are you trying to tell us?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, what direction you want me to go? And you wish God would drop down on 2 stone tablets and say, this is what I want you to do. So it's hard to discern that, though you know He's loving you and caring and guiding you.
Right.
Yeah.
But trying to find the road signs through the congestion of one of those roundabouts in Boston, right? That's what this was, a roundabout. Yeah.
Right.
So now that we were back, we were back in the district that we had left. And so we were like, didn't really feel comfortable in any of the Nazarene churches or going back to any of the Nazarene churches. So we were like, well, where does that leave us? So we're like, I started looking up churches, and we tried a Methodist church, and that was like PTSD for us. It was very much like the Nazarene church, and we were like, couldn't get out of there fast enough one Sunday. And then we tried a Catholic church. I don't know if it was the Sunday that we were there, but something just didn't like...
You did try a Catholic church?
We did try a Catholic church, yeah. Mm-hmm. And
I'm surprised that was even a possibility on your horizon.
Because we were like, we got to try all these different areas and find out. And I don't know if it was the Sunday or the church that we were at, but it just seemed like people weren't paying attention, and we're so used to like the order of service in like the Protestant churches that we were like, how are we following along? We couldn't figure anything out, so we were like, I don't know, it just didn't fit us at that time. And then we stepped into the Episcopal Church, and it was like there was just this peace, and we felt like this was a place that, like, our first time that we really experienced liturgy, and that was just really like amazing because we had never really experienced that before, and we're like, oh, this is really awesome. And we could walk into the church and walk out with anybody asking us questions or trying to make us do anything, and it just felt like this is going to be a nice healing place. And so we decided, well, we'll try this and see how that works. And and we started talking to the pastor, and because we kind of wanted to get involved, but at the same time we just wanted to take a step back.
And you're really looking for a church, not at this point another pastoral direction, or were you?
Yeah, so at that point I still hadn't let go of that.
Desire.
I still had that feeling of that calling in my life, but I didn't know what it meant anymore because I hadn't experienced anything outside of the Nazarene church. So looking once we got into the Episcopal Church, it was funny, that's where we met Father Jürgen Leas, who was very instrumental in a lot of our journey here. Mm-hmm. But when we came into that church, I wasn't really seeking it at that moment. We were just looking for a place to heal. Yeah. And at that time, in my typical evangelical ways, I just really wanted to get involved. That was what I always really done. Every time I got into a church, I just got over-involved right at the very beginning, burned out. And I went up to Father Jürgen and said, I'm actually going to get involved here. And
Father was Episcopal priest at the time.
Yes,
he was your Episcopal
exactly.
priest, right.
And he just said, no, you're not going to get involved. Take a year, take 1 year, and just come through this healing process. And that was probably the best advice that anybody could have given me. And it was caring advice. It wasn't advice that somebody was trying to get something out of me, for their church or for anything like that. They were really concerned about my well-being and my healing and my relationship with God, which was very powerful to us.
Yeah.
And you were working at the time? Had you found a job?
Yeah.
You had been working in Boston, I think, at that time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so when we had moved back to Boston, I found a job in corporate entry-level job in Boston, and was working there.
All right. So your feet are getting on the ground, and you're finding a home spiritually with a good father. Father is a good leader. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. And the Episcopal Church that we were a part of, it was interesting dynamics because within the first year, one of the other priests there, Father Bart Stevens, he was a wonderful man, and all of a sudden, we get a notice one Sunday that he's leaving to become Roman Catholic. Him and his family and his children are all moving to Montana, And
he was so peaceful. Like, I remember sitting next to him one day in church and just, he didn't even have to say anything. I just felt this peace emanating off of him all of the time. And so, between him and Father Jurgen, they were our favorite priests at that church. And so he was the first one that we heard of going over to the Catholic Church. And we were like, oh, we're going to miss him, but,
Right.
You probably hadn't heard of very many folk doing that
No.
before. Right,
Yeah, and we didn't understand why, we just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
It's preference, just like you do in the Nazarene church or any other church, you kind of, it's kind of this idea of, you have this consumerism idea, you know what I mean? Like you go to the place where you kind of fit in or you want to go. So we just figured he's doing what what he feels that he needs to do at this point. Or,
Right.
because we didn't really fully understand at that point that, church wasn't necessarily something you try to shop around for. You kind of, you go to church and you meet God there, and it's about that.
It's about your relationship with Jesus.
Right, exactly.
Right.
But church, you're really more of that mindset. Well, what church didn't really matter.
Right.
That was that mindset that's so common.
And Father Jurgen had been very instrumental as well. He had this beautiful vision that he shared with people all the time in his congregation of these. He had this vision of 3 streams coming together into one. And he had the evangelical stream, the charismatic stream, and the Catholic stream. And that was very evident in the church itself. It was a great blend of all of these traditions. And
I feel like when he was there, even though we didn't know what the Catholic Church then felt like, looking back on it, it was very Catholic in the way that he presented the services and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of that vision that he had with it. It was just so beautifully done.
His own trajectory. I don't know yet. Where he was at in his journey in relationship to your journey, but he himself was eventually on that thing. So to what extent he was sharing that with the congregation and shaping all of that, bringing those streams of evangelicalism and the charismatic renewal into his church.
Right. Yeah, so eventually down the road, maybe 2-3 years later, the split happened in the Episcopal Church between the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Church of North America. So the Anglican Church of North America split off with 2 different parishes or churches, and the Episcopal Church stayed where it was. So we ended up with 3 churches where we used to have one very vibrant and strong community. And Father Jurgen went over to one of the Anglican parish churches. And we ended up staying at the Episcopal Church at that time in our lives because we agreed with a lot of the Anglican theology, but we were so attached to where we were because it was our healing place, and we felt like with the church breaking down a little bit and having less people at the church itself, we were going to be able to get to know people, get involved in a way after all those years. So that's definitely what we did. We ended up taking some time and getting involved there. I worked in the altar service and worked my way through like subdeaconing and master of ceremony and got to really know the new priest there, and that was a really good time in our lives.
You guys have changed so much over the years. You weren't ready to start all over again somewhere else.
Right.
Especially with this new Anglican that was coming up, and we were like, I don't know how long that's going to last, and is it going to be similar to the Nazarene Church? We're not really sure. So
it's going to be another break. Why don't we pause there? Time for a break here, and we'll come back and see then how long you stayed in that local parish and how you moved on from there. Our guests are David and Neesha Oliver. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Journey Home. I'm Marcus Grodi, your host, and our guests tonight are David and Neesha Oliver, and I've interrupted you. Your church, your Episcopal Church broke up in the sense of dividing into the more Anglican streams, and for those of you that have been following these things over the last 20, 30 years, it was pretty much a moral issue and moral teachings within the Episcopal Church and more traditional Anglicans. More traditional Episcopalians not really comfortable with the direction that the moral issues were going, so you were breaking away. And here we are today, and there's probably 25 of these independent Anglican groups, but at the time there weren't that many in America. but you had decided to stay with the Episcopal congregation. Your connections there, your involvement, weren't really ready to start anew. I'm sure you were, though, missing Father Jürgen.
Yes, greatly.
Definitely.
The new priest that came in, he was great too, but it's, Father Jürgen, you can't replace him. So.
Well, you've been so important to your healing.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And so, like I said, we stayed at the Episcopal Church for a while. I think we were there for, was it 2 years before we decided that something just still wasn't feeling full for us. And, we were like, well, maybe we should have gone to the Anglican Church. And we weren't really sure. And there was actually, when our church split, there was the Episcopal one that stayed, and then there was 2 Anglican splits.
Okay.
And so we loved Father Jürgen. We wanted to go with that way, but for some reason we just didn't feel like if we did go to the Anglican Church that was the direction for us. I don't know why. I think part of it had to do with your discernment about like your priesthood or pastorate or deacon or whatever. So you had started looking into that in the Episcopal Church. I think that's really part of what pushed us into the Anglican Church too, because you kind of came to a spot with that.
Yeah, so for me, like looking into the discernment within the Episcopal Church, the priest was very, encouraging of my vocation, which was very nice to have, and wanted me to attend the Episcopal Discernment Day. So, of course, I went along for that. And I did not feel a connection at all being there. It was very different than what I expected. It was, I'm not really sure how to describe it, you know what I mean? It was just, I didn't have that connection with it. And I knew that was not where I was heading to. Plus, going into that direction would mean I would need to go back to school full time and get my master's degree. And I just didn't really feel ready for that either at that point.
And I'm wondering if, and I may be totally wrong in this, but I remember back in the days when I was a Presbyterian, as they were moving in the directions where the Episcopal Church went years later, though the Presbyterians didn't go that far, it's not like you go from one set of standards on morality to then another. It's that you go from one set to kind of watered down, lack of commitment, kind of a tolerant. And so it kind of muddies the water on a calling. What are you going to teach as a priest and all that? And I wonder if you were encountering that.
Yeah, most certainly. And because in our Episcopal Church that we were part of, one of the reasons we stayed as well is we felt that they were more traditional, that particular community. So it was kind of a little safe haven, in the midst of everything else that was going on with the moral side of things within the Episcopal Church.
But it didn't mean like if you became a pastor, then you got assigned to a different church, it was going to be the same way. So there was that unknown of like, we could end up in a church that doesn't believe what we believe.
And if you held to traditional views, you may not get ordained.
Right. Exactly.
Because there would be criteria.
Right, and they had noted very clearly that, when you become when you go into the discernment process, they kind of move you out of your church that you're in, so they give you a different experience, which is, always what I was always seeking, but not particularly in this case, you know what I mean? So, yeah, it was an eye-opener for me that I wasn't really going to pursue any orders there, any holy orders in that route. So, yeah, we're kind of back to square one, I still have this calling, don't know what to do with it. Something still felt like it was missing a little bit for us. We wanted to kind of go deeper in our faith, and we didn't know how to really get there. So eventually we learned of one of the Anglican churches that had split off, not Father Jürgen's church, but another one. They had been much smaller, and the priest there was seeking, I had somebody come in as a deacon. So we had conversations with him and learned that I could become permanent deacon in the Anglican Church without having to go back to school or anything like that. It was just a process I would have to go through still, but it was
maybe some courses or something,
but not
courses. Like going to school, just like courses that they had or something.
Exactly. So I started to seek that out, and that promise of moving on to diaconate, and thinking that might be the route for me. So we decided to make a break and go to the Anglican Church and start seeking that out. And during that time, I was doing subdeaconing at the church and, kind of pushing along my process to try to become a deacon. But meanwhile, just to kind of change gears a little bit here, because there's two things that are going on in parallel. So we have all this discernment going on for me. Right. But then also during that time, we're a few years into our marriage and have been having infertility issues. So that was a major thing going on during that time that also led us to where we are today.
Right.
So I'm going to pass it off to you.
So early on, when we were first married, we went into Boston to a specialist because at the time that they found out that his misdiagnosis was actually a thyroid issue, they also diagnosed him with Kallmann syndrome because he hadn't really gone through puberty yet, but that could be because of the thyroid. But so they had diagnosed him with Kallmann syndrome and said that he might not be able to have children. So when we got married, we said, well, let's go into Boston, find out what our options are, if there are any options, Yeah. And we were in the office for maybe a couple minutes with the doctor, and he was like, you don't have Kallmann syndrome. And we're like, what? Because at this point, you had been taking synthetic testosterone because that's what you have to do if you have Kallmann syndrome. And so he was like, get off this testosterone and check your count and everything. And it was, low count, but there was something there. So I was like, well, maybe we will have a chance to have children. So that was really exciting. And we held on to that hope. And all the time during these changes with the churches, I'd been tracking my cycles and my temperature and all the stuff and ovulation kits that give you the smiley faces, and we're like, oh, everything's great, it's just whenever.
Were you doing essentially NFP during the time, essentially what you were doing?
I don't think we knew about that then, yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I had just, we were very hopeful and like, okay, well, it's just when God's timing. And so by the time we had gotten to the Anglican Church, I had been tracking all this stuff for a while, and nothing had been happening, and we're like, okay, we didn't want to face the facts, but we were like, we might need medical help for this, but IVF was against our beliefs. We didn't want to do that at all because we believed in the sanctity of human life and from conception and everything. So we were just like, that's just not our route. And, so I had talked to my doctor, and all she could give me was IVF doctors, and I was like, what do you do if you are dealing with infertility and you don't want to go that route, So when we were at the Anglican Church, I think our pastor had told us that his wife knew of people or knew something, so I set up a meeting with her, and I talked to her, and she said, I had a friend, or I knew of somebody that was Catholic, or, didn't want to go through IVF, but there was something with the Catholic Church. And she said, I don't know what the name of it is, but I'll try to find out what it is and get it to you. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, after our meeting, I went online and started searching things, and I was able to find the naprotechnology through the Pope Paul VI Institute. And I was like, oh, this is really encouraging. Like, we might have something here that we can, pursue. And so you had to look up doctors, and the doctors that were closest to us were an hour and a half away, which is minimal travel compared to what a lot of other people do.
That area of the world, right? Exactly.
So we found that doctor, and we did, sometimes it was phone appointments, sometimes we actually had to go into the office. And so our first phone appointment, he said, okay, well, you need to get it set up with a nurse too, because there's a Creighton model charting system that you have to learn and all that helps them gather their data. So we're like, okay. So the nurse was another hour and a half, different direction. So between the appointments, one direction and the other, kept us very busy, especially while trying to figure out all our faith stuff and everything. But the Catholic doctors were amazing. Like, it was so amazing to go into an office and, be like, oh, we've been struggling with infertility for 4 or 5 years. And for the doctor to say, or the nurse to say, oh, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? And not just, like, oh, or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it was so nice to have a caring environment where, you just felt supported and prayed for, and, as tough as everything that you're going through, So it was a really great thing. And when we were going through all these changes and stuff, at this point still the Catholic Church wasn't on our mind as far as going to the Catholic Church, but we were like, oh, this is a great support system. And our nurse was very influential, because as we're talking to her about different things in the church, she'd say things like, oh, you guys would make great Catholics, And we were like, huh, okay, interesting, And then I think it was about this time that we had heard that Father Jurgen had then gone to the Catholic Church. So we're like, okay, so 2 of our favorite priests at our Episcopal Church have now become Catholic. Like, what is up with that? So I think at this point we decided, you were still looking into the diaconate, but things still weren't matching up. Our pastor wasn't like meeting with you and not doing the mentoring that you really needed. And we were just seeing it slip out of our fingers again. We were like, okay, God, what is going on? You know, like, you know, we have this desire to be part of the church and to, you know, feel like we have this call, and it's just going away, you know. And so, you know, I think.
And with the nephro technology, the whole aspect of things, it was a really interesting concept because they look at things as a disease, you know, whereas IVF, you go into there and you just, you know, the goal is get you pregnant, you know, whatever you can do, throw money at it and get you pregnant. Whether or not your body can actually hold that child or anything, it's kind of just, you know, go for it. So within nephro technology, they look at it as a disease and try to figure out what's wrong with your body in order to heal that, so that way you can conceive. And then when you do conceive, you'll actually be able to carry that child and have a successful pregnancy. And their success rates are actually much higher than IVF as well. So there was a lot of encouragement there. So we were, you know, kind of plotting and going our way through all of that. And as Neesha had mentioned, the nurse especially was very helpful for us, helped us to understand both like the psychological side of things and the religious side of things. So psychologically, you know, she kind of taught us how we were both handling our infertility differently, you know, because with men, there's kind of, you know, a way that you kind of waffle things. You put things in boxes and you put them away. You don't deal with your emotions. And, you know, she has explained how, you know, women are more like spaghetti. Your mind's going all the time. Like that you can never kind of disconnect from your infertility. And just helped us as a couple, as a married couple, to better deal with that together. And then on the religious side of things, she was also teaching us all about suffering, which we hadn't really understood before in a sense of how that could be almost a vocation, you know what I mean?
And not something to really avoid, you know, and like if for some reason it came that we couldn't have children, that, you know, sometimes that's what God has for you. And we may never know in this life, you know, but, you know, it might just be, you know, she talked about like a garden of crosses, and that was like really helpful to try to understand that. And so for the garden of crosses, like she had given this small little story of a man who goes into this garden of crosses. He's got his cross on his back and he puts it down. He says, Jesus, this is too heavy for me to carry. So Jesus says, okay, well, you have your pick from these crosses here in this garden and pick the one that's right for you. And, you know, kind of like Goldilocks, he goes through, and this one's not heavy enough, and this one's too heavy. And he finally picks up a cross, and this one's just right. And when Jesus says, well, that's the one you came in with. You know, this idea that, you know, Jesus doesn't give you more than you can handle, and that your suffering isn't, for the first time in our lives, kind of understanding it in the sense of it's not a reflection on us. You know what I mean? That we're these despicable people who should be suffering because God's punishing you because of something or whatever. And
So meanwhile we're going through all of that infertility, which had a huge impact on us, our lives, because of our schedule and just the emotional amount of things that was taken from us. But we're just kind of getting fed all of these little things through that Catholic infertility doctors. And meanwhile, back on the spiritual side of things, you know, we were getting some books and things like that. We had a friend send us a book with some comical title, because it's a checklist to become a Catholic or something like that. And we went through that book, and you know, we realized we're like 75% of the way to being Catholic already, and we're kind of shocked by that. And the rest of the percentage that we weren't there yet wasn't because we disagreed; it was just because we didn't understand. And like Neesha said, during that time at the Anglican Church, we had been there for a few years, and the diaconate really wasn't panning out; it wasn't going in that direction. So we decided to pull back from that, and we just were kind of lost. We didn't know where we're going to go. What are we going to do?
We can't be Nazarene. We can't be Methodist. We can't be, you know, Episcopal, you know. So we were like, where are we going to go? And we kind of said, okay, well, we need a landing ground before we make any more decisions. So it was the last safe, comfortable place was the Episcopal Church. So we figured we'd go back to the Episcopal Church while we're making our decision and try to reevaluate and figure out from there, okay, what's our next steps, you know? So at that point we decided, well, Father Jurgen has become Catholic at this point, so why don't we meet with him and talk to him about his reasonings and find out, you know, why he became Catholic, and, you know, if there's, you know, anything that could help us to process this and stuff. And then we met with the priest at the Episcopal Church and talked to him and said, why should we stay here? So, we had a couple meetings with each of them and, evaluated that and just really felt like through our infertility, like really came the answer because, our beliefs of the sanctity of human life and the ideas of suffering, and it just felt like the Catholic Church had that for us, had that space and had that, like, not a simple answer of like, oh, you're just going to get pregnant, or, oh, why don't you just do IVF? Like you could walk into the church and say, I'm struggling with this, and people will say, I'm sorry, I'll pray for you, and I'll say a rosary for you, a novena, or, here's some holy water. You have a billion resources, and it's not like, oh, you're just going to get through it, like not like just set aside, And so we were feeling more and more like this, like just a comfortable place for us to be. And also,
the Catholic understanding of suffering really connects you with the whole body.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Of Christ. This is a cross you bear. It's not just for yourselves, it's
right.
for all the people in the world that are struggling with infertility and
right.
confusion and ignorance. Well, that's part of the crosses we bear for them.
Exactly. Right. Yeah, and it actually prompted me to write a book about it because we took our story and fictionalized it, and because there's not many books out there or resources for people going through it, and you feel completely alone, even though I know there's millions of other people going through this, but you feel so alone. And so I wanted to have a book that people could read and feel like, oh, that's a normal feeling, and also has our little faith journey in there too, of coming into the Catholic Church. And, I wanted people to learn about the naprotechnology, because before I had talked to that pastor's wife, I had no idea about it, and so the only thing that's out there is IVF, and not, I think a lot of people don't really want to do IVF, but they don't have any other options, so they say, well, if we want to have kids, that's the only way.
Nobody mentions the other options.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and through all that, like, some of the what we went through, you feel kind of awkward going through that time of suffering in your life, because when you're going through suffering, you feel a lot of negative feelings, a lot of things that aren't necessarily the most Christian feelings, and you feel like maybe I'm a horrible person, or why am I feeling this way? But going through that and connecting with other people who are going through that, everybody has those same feelings, and they're natural and they're normal for that time, and it's okay as long as you're not going to get stuck in that route. You pull through it, and there is this idea of taking your suffering and uniting it with Christ. So yeah, we took all of that and just kind of really fell in love with the church. We started listening to EWTN at work, all like 40 hours a week.
Exactly.
Earbuds in, and
every time we heard something, it was like, we'd come home and be like, did you hear this on that program? Or did you hear this? And like, yeah, that's so awesome. Like, I had no idea. Like, it started exploding our faith. It became so much deeper than, we thought we knew everything before, And then when we were open to the Catholic Church and all the theology, we were like, wow, this is so amazing. Like, I had no idea there was more depth to it than I had known before, And it was just something
right.
that was just like so awesome to us.
Right. And one of our last meetings with Father Jürgen, he had prayed with us. He had done a Hail Mary with us, and one of the things he said to me that really stuck with me was, make sure that when you come into the Catholic Church, that when you decide, if you decide that you do that with a deep, sincere fullness of heart, that's what God wants you to do. It wasn't a decision to take lightly. Obviously, our history had been kind of all over the place, and at that point, we realized, we have nowhere else to go. Why would we not just join the church? That was founded by Christ, and we're if we can't be there, we can be nowhere.
Right.
And it's really, in the end, it had everything that we were looking for, because all the other churches had pieces and parts of it, but nothing that was that fullness of the faith that united us with the Church Universal.
Even though you had to give up the pastorate or the priesthood or anything like that, we have, our eyes have been open to the third orders or oblates, and so we're kind of finding like this fullness through that, and being able to join a monk or a nun order and pray with them and be part of that, and that's been like something that we've been looking into.
Have you discerned that you won't be having children? Is that
so
from your studies?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we stopped the process in October of last year, I think it was because it came to the point where it was either I needed to have surgery, which I have a lot of autoimmune issues, which makes that really difficult for me. And his count, we couldn't make it any higher. So it was kind of like, well, we're not going to put me through surgery if we know that we can't raise the count. So, we're just kind of like, if it's going to happen, it's going to be a miracle of God anyway. So we're just going to leave it. And, if it happens, it'll be wonderful. And if it doesn't, then that's the vocation and the suffering that we're allotted.
Infertility, as any suffering, can really define your life. And for 4.5 years, we stopped being married. We were now the infertile couple that was just trying to deal with our infertility. So all of our waking moments were spent either at work or trying to, find a solution, driving to appointments or things like that. And we tried all kinds of alternative methods, acupuncture, herbal remedies, all kinds of different things. And, in the end, we were really kind of burnt out from the whole thing and really felt like, we need to stop trying to make it happen for ourselves.
And just be a married couple again.
And learn what it's like to be married again, because that's just where it came back.
Right.
But all that, it doesn't mean that infertility obviously has, left us or that, we don't think about it. Obviously it stays with you.
Yeah.
But we've been uniting that with all the resources that the Catholic Church gives us. We've been picking up all kinds of movies on saints, books from saints, just reading and listening to things and seeing their suffering and seeing their pain and realizing how insignificant really our pain is compared to half what they went through. But we're able to have that connection and that fellowship with those who have gone before us. And then on top of that, there's, we have many monks and nuns praying for us. And, we do our novenas and visit the Divine Mercy Shrine in Massachusetts. And, we do everything we can to continue to pray for it, but all in God's time.
Well, and again, it's discerning God's call for you too.
Exactly.
Not some model box you've got to fit into. And if you don't fit into that box, you're a failure. Or blah blah blah. That's and the opportunities that God gives you now to serve Him, to serve others, to grow in holiness. That old sanctity you talked about, even back there.
Right. Exactly.
The Methodist,
Yeah, exactly. So in the end, all that kind of come back around while that was going on. We'd been in the Episcopal Church interviewing on between the Episcopal and the Catholic Church, and we came out of that and just started seeking out, a Catholic parish we could go to. That took a little bit to find one, but we eventually found a place that was very conservative and had that high church liturgical feel for us. And
that was similar to that Episcopal Church that we had. That was that,
And it made a great connection for us, and
I think we actually found the church because we went to Father Jurgen's when he became a priest in the Catholic Church, and that's how we found that church. So, because it was in that church, he invited us to that ceremony, which was awesome.
Right, and he had actually recommended as well. And coming through all of that, we had joined into RCIA, and then immediately we had to get my marriage convalidated because as I was raised in the Catholic Church, I hadn't really had that permission to get married outside of the church.
You didn't even know that you needed it, so.
So we had our marriage convalidated on Valentine's Day 2014. Came into the church on Easter.
Easter of last year for me, got First Communion and Confirmation, and then I think yours was a week later because you had already had First Communion. So.
Right, so I was confirmed a week later.
Sweet. Sweet. We've got 2 minutes left. Real quick, I want to ask you a question. Sure. You've mentioned novenas and rosaries and holy water and Mary and all that. And there are people outside the church that they really don't think us Catholics are Christians. Did you find Jesus when you came home?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Most certainly.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Neesha said, the understanding of the relationship with Jesus just exploded.
Yeah.
Like right now we do Liturgy of the Hours, try to at least do Compline every day and things like that. And I feel more connected to God now than I have ever before.
It's kind of like before you come into the Catholic Church, you're like, oh, they pray to these other saints and they're not praying to Jesus. But then, like, as you come into the Catholic Church, you're like, wait, these other people are like friends. They're like asking a friend to pray for you, except they're already on the other side. So they're a lot closer. So, it's so great because it's like, you have, your friends on the other side, you have Jesus, and it just pulls everything together. It's just so much more full.
Yeah, the fullness of the faith.
Exactly.
Every saint that you pray to and ask for assistance is doing the same thing that John the Baptist did. He's pointing to Jesus, saying the Lamb of God. Right. Everyone, Our Lady is all pointing to our Lord and drawing our attention.
Right.
There, I did notice that you have NeeshaOliver.wordpress.com. Is that your? your blog site?
That's where my blog is, yeah, and then the link to my book that you can buy that and everything. So.
Okay, so if they want to know more about your journey, more of the details, they can go to neeshaoliver.wordpress.com.
Yep.
Thank you both.
Thank you
very
Thank you both for joining us and sharing your journey, and our prayers continue with you, and that God continue to bless your lives and open you up for whatever He might want to share with you as He continues to love you and open doors for your service. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Journey Home. What a story, and I hope it's been an encouragement to you, especially if you're going through similar issues that they both went through. This is why God drops stories into our lives, to inspire us to walk closer with Christ and His church. God bless you. See you next week.